So first, I want to welcome everyone. Most of you guys are in second year. So today, what I'm going to try to do is give you a little bit of an overview of this course and what it's going to be about. I'm hoping that it's extremely different from any experience that you've had at university so far. So what I want to do is I want to talk for maybe 10 minutes about where the idea for this course came from and how it's come about, to give you an idea of what I expect from you and kind of give you an idea of where this course is going. So this year we have 6 TAs. We have Olivia, Matt, Nawaz, Chelsea, and back up in the back corner is Kayla. And we'll talk about why they're all here and what we're going to be doing in this course. So if you haven't already, please add @Guelph Food Prof to your Twitter account. A lot of this course is actually going to be marked through your interaction with Twitter. So again, this is going to be a really different way of teaching this course. So if you have Twitter, please add it now. It's also going to be a way I interact with you through the class. So first, everyone welcome. So let's talk a little bit about my history, where I've come from, why I'm doing this course the way I'm doing it. So my biggest milestone in my educational career was me failing grade 4. It had a profound influence on how I actually interact with information and how I interact with people. So I have a terrible, terrible time hearing in large crowds. So if there's a lot of background noise and someone's talking to me, I'm not going to be able to understand what you're saying. And this has led to a delay in my language development. So I have a really, really hard time pronouncing words that I haven't memorized. So if there's a word that I'm trying to sound out phonetically, it's pretty bad usually. If there's a last name I don't recognize, I butcher it. So please bear with me. And when I get really excited or really anxious, I tend to talk fast. So there's a lot of things I'm going to do for this course to try to compensate for that inability to kind of slow down in the way I communicate. And we'll talk about all those mechanisms I'm going to give to you guys or to the class. Now, something that's recently I've started talking about is I have extremely high anxiety. So to be in front of 250 people isn't really an environment I'm comfortable in. But I've developed a lot of kind of tools that I can use so I'm comfortable in front of everyone. The other thing is I tend to say really awkward, strange things sometimes. And I would give examples, but I don't really want to. And I go through these wicked manic phases where I have obsessive behavior, where I constantly need to work, which is what we're going to talk about in this course a little bit. And then I have depressive phases, which are terrible. But one of the things that I am really good at and enjoy is I'm a very critical person. So being a faculty member is the perfect job for me because I actually enjoy critiquing you. So that's part of one of the reasons I love this job. But because of my anxiety, a lot of people will notice I teach without shoes on, and I get a lot of weird comments on teaching evaluations about not wearing shoes. So just be aware that I do. So if there's a fire alarm, hopefully I don't have to run out without shoes on. So being this super awkward, self-critical person, I've spent a lot of time critiquing myself. And I got really, really good at it. So I went from being academically a terrible student to being a very good PhD student. I published a lot. But as part of that self-critique, I developed a severe eating disorder through my PhD. I lost about 90 pounds during that time. But at the time, I also met my wife, who helped me get through a lot of that. So right when I graduated, I was very, very fortunate in not having to do a postdoc. So I went right to the University of Saskatchewan, and I met these 2 professors, Dr. Lowe, who was the chair at the time and who was the person that took a huge risk in hiring me, and Dr. Khatchatorians. And they were such polar opposites in how they taught and how they interacted with people. They were both extremely formal, and they both demanded an extremely high amount of academic rigor from anyone that took their classes. And in that time, I won a Young Scientist Award, but I also had the birth of my first son, whose name's Kieran. So he's 7 now. I then decided that I wanted to be a little bit closer to home, and I wanted to be at a little bit more prestigious of a university. So I went to Rutgers University, and I took a faculty position there. And I met the most amazing people there. Rutgers is one of the biggest universities in the United States, just down the street from Princeton. And let me tell you, the brilliance that was there was absolutely inspiring. The quality of the students and the quality of the faculty was just tremendous. And I met this guy, Rick Ludisher, who kind of became a mentor to me. And one of the things that was really interesting about Rick is that even though he was academically just aspired to be one of the best, he also cared a lot about undergraduate teaching, which isn't something you always see at one of these huge academic institutions. And he taught me a lot of what's going to kind of come through today. So while we were at Rutgers, I won a whole bunch more awards, which was great, but I also had the birth of my second son, which is Logan, right there. I also became a member of IF&H, which was a brand new institute that we were starting up for $20 million. And there we tried to understand how food plays a role in health. So we kind of talked about this one health mentality where we talked about exercise physiology, diet, lifestyle, all of these things incorporated into a very complex institute that spanned many, many departments. And then I decided it was time to come home. And it was a hard decision to come back to Guelph. Guelph's a lot smaller of a school compared to Rutgers. Rutgers has about 70,000 students across 3 campuses. But one of the reasons I came back to Guelph, and something that I think undergraduates are so unaware of, is you are at one of the premier agriculture schools in the world. We rank top 10 globally. So if you think you're going to graduate from here and take a mediocre role in society, you're wrong. You guys will play an extremely important role in the area of food and nutrition, which is arguably the most important role in society, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. So I expect a lot from you. I know you're second-year students, but I expect that the interactions in this course are going to challenge you, are going to frustrate you. There's going to be things that are difficult to learn. But you don't understand the importance you play in global society when it comes to food production. In 2016, I got to work with my scientific crush. So everyone, once you get up into the PhD levels, has a person that they look to or idolize. Niels Bohr, Watson and Crick, Linnaeus Pauling, Niels deGrasse, whoever it may be. Mine was a guy named Dick Weiss. He was a professor at Georgetown University, and when he spoke, the world stopped moving. He could talk about the most mundane thing, and his deep, sultry voice was enough to turn heads. This man was the most brilliant person I have ever met in my entire life. And I got to work with him, and we published a paper in this really high-impact journal, and everything was just on top of the world. And then I turned 40, which was about a year ago, and it was horrible. It was a midlife crisis. I had one of the largest Toronto Maple Leaf autograph collections. I sold about half of it, which was very, very difficult to do. It was like losing a child. I developed this strange, very real hatred for Donald Trump. But I was fascinated by the tweets that he would send out and the interaction and the global impact that that had on the US political elections. And I thought, well, how can I incorporate all of these things that I'm doing, which are not necessarily normal, and make it productive? And that brings us to here. So I began to critique my teaching. And one of the things that I really struggled with is, where do I fit here at Guelph? And especially around food and agriculture. So as faculty, we always talk about you. The first thing we do when you try to apply to one of our labs is we look at your Twitter, we look at your Facebook, we understand who likes to party, and then we decide who gets jobs based on that. So the impact that your social media has is extremely important. You guys are second year, you're going to be starting to look for co-op positions pretty soon. Employers do this. This is the first thing any employer, any recruiter will do. So it is important that you start to create a social profile for yourself, that you want to represent yourself from an industry perspective. You want to make sure that you're known for what you want to be known for. And I'm hoping that is, I don't know what it's for. But anyhow, we talk. And as faculty, we often say this generation is disinterested in education. And I felt that way at times where you're talking about something so excited and you look out and you see people sleeping or you see people on their computers, and I like to move, so as I move up through the class, I look at what people are doing on their computers and I'll see YouTube playing sometimes. I don't mind. You know, sometimes I'll make a little comment as I check and see what everyone's doing. If you don't want to be here, don't come to class. I'm going to facilitate you not having to come to class if you choose not to. I think it's a huge disservice to yourself not to come, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do in a couple minutes that'll actually make it so none of you have to come to class if you choose not to. But being this critical person, I started to self-evaluate. And perhaps it's not you. Perhaps it's us and our teaching methods. We were educated, well, professors and a lot of the older professors, we became educated before the internet. So information and the acquisition of information was extremely challenging. So if you were a particle physicist doing research on some kind of quantum mechanics, you would have to go spend days in the library looking for a few journal articles. You can do that in the blink of an eye now. But education hasn't changed. We still sit there and demand you memorize a whole bunch of useless facts which are going to be outdated in 10 years, and then all of a sudden your educational experience becomes a little bit less meaningful. The other thing I learned when I was trying to become self-reflective is you guys spend a lot of time on social media. I tried to figure out ways to incorporate stuff that's going to try to make learning easier for you. But Snapchat and Instagram, no, those aren't for me. I know that they're the most popular platforms now, but I don't understand them, and I don't see them as useful contributors to society. So having said that, welcome to this lecture series. Which most of you, or hopefully some of you, will be a little bit terrified. So now that you know me, let's find out why we're here together. Agriculture at Guelph is extremely exciting, and you're part of something. You are our recruits for future graduate students. You guys are the future professors who are going to replace me in a few years. At Guelph, we have massive initiatives centered around food and health. There's $77 million grants on food and agriculture that created the Arrow Food Institute, which if you don't know about it, you should go look it up. There's brilliant, brilliant leadership right now in food and agriculture at Guelph. And we have such important partnerships with places like OMAFRA, which if you don't know is just that blue building right on the corner. All of you guys should start, sorry, I keep saying guys and I shouldn't. All of you should start to become very familiar with what is happening in food at this institution. If you're in agriculture, if you're in nutrition, if you're in food science, this is the academic institution in Canada and one of the top in the world. So you have a lot of burden to carry in that you are going to take very important roles in society. And when I came, I kind of sat here and I wanted to figure out what puzzle could I fit in at Guelph in this whole food picture. And it's through you guys. And what, you guys again, sorry. What I want to do is I want to show you everything that's amazing and important happening at Guelph. I'm not going to sit here and fill your mind with facts that you can look up on the internet in 15 minutes. I'm going to share with you the cutting edge research that's happening at Guelph and why you need to know about it. Why, from a historical perspective, does it matter? So if we're going to talk about canning, which doesn't seem overly important, canning revolutionized how we live our lives today. And if we don't remember that we started pasteurizing milk to get rid of tuberculosis, if we forget those things and forget why we do what we do to foods, we can't fix the problems we currently have, like high sugar contents in foods, high salt contents. They're extremely, extremely difficult to pull those out of foods. So we'll talk about all of those things. So what I want to do is show you how important of a role you play here at Guelph when it comes to food, but I want you to feel like you are included in the conversation. And that's what I'm going to try to use Twitter for, is I want to create a platform for you guys, for this class, to be able to interact with each other, but also to interact with the faculty that are here and abroad. So I'm covering this course for a sabbatical leave. So I'm doing it for 1 year. And all of you are thinking, why this year? But Doug Goff, who was the professor that taught this course, created an amazing timeline and an amazing flow of content. So I'm going to use this flow to tell you a story. My goal is to hold you for 80 minutes, your attention for 80 minutes a day without you looking down. I don't want you taking notes. I don't want you looking at your computers. I don't want you doing anything except listening and thinking. And again, I'm going to facilitate this. I'm not going to expect you not to take notes without putting mechanisms in place for you to succeed. So we'll talk about this all. So there's great profs who aspire to teach, great profs who like to teach, who try to teach, who tolerate teaching, and who avoid teaching. And for those, I suggest an industry job. What I'm hoping to do here is to inspire. I want you all to realize what an extremely important role you're going to play in society, but also what role you're going to begin to play here at Guelph. And if I don't inspire, at least I'll be one that I can say has tried to teach. So here we go. All right, we can put the chemicals in now. It's okay. What time is this class done at? So I have an hour. Good. Perfect. Okay. CAG. So, first, how many of you, show of hands, and this will be the only time I do this, show of hands, how many of you people hate answering questions or hate being asked a question in class? I'm guessing as you move further back the class, more hands go up. And a lot of times the other thing that happens is eyes go down. I won't ask any questions. I'm going to ask all my questions through Twitter. So when you're online, and you'll see an example in a couple minutes, and when you're in the Twitter account, so when you're in class, bring your cell phone, bring a computer, bring a tablet. We will engage through Twitter in 2 different ways in class. One is by asking questions. So you'll see Twitter polls. The other thing you can do is you can ask a question by tweeting me at that Guelph food prof and hashtagging questions. And I have Kayla at the back of the class monitoring the Twitter account. If one person asks a question, I may not stop the class and answer it. If there's 5 or 6 questions, being at 5 or 6 people asking the same question, she'll interrupt the lecture and then I'll address it. If I can't address it in class, I'm a chemist. I'm going to teach you guys microbiology, biology, nutrition. I am not an expert in any of these. I'm good at it, I understand it, but there are people better. So if I don't know an answer, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll come back the next day with the answer. So a lot of teaching pedagogy has really been based on this information age where getting information is a challenge. We don't have that anymore. So now information is available at the tip of your fingers. So a couple days ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who is Gudrun. It's actually my wife's friend. So that's Gudrun. That's my wife, Darcy. And we were talking about inquiry-based learning. And inquiry-based learning is kind of the gold standard of teaching. And if I'm going to take a chance at doing something either really great or really bad, I'm going to try doing the hardest thing possible. So the importance with inquiry-based learning is that it allows students at all levels to understand the domain of science. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm just setting it.
Okay. But it allows you to develop your critical thinking skills. Because let me tell you what's going to happen when you guys graduate. You're going to go and you're going to be asked something. Why does Maillard reaction happen? If you reply to your boss, well, let me go look that up. Or you open the book and you say, Maillard reaction is a chemical reaction between a reducing sugar and an amino acid at elevated pH. They're going to say, thank you very much for being employed here. Good luck in your next employment position. You need to be able to assimilate information and knowledge and create an opinion for yourself. That's the point of this course, and that's the point of inquiry-based learning. So like any great academic, when she told me about inquiry-based learning, and I had no idea what it is, first thing I did was go to Wikipedia. So inquiry-based learning is active learning, but it doesn't typically portray a smooth path to knowledge. So when we talk about the implications of food and health, this isn't a straightforward conversation we're going to have. We're going to talk about chemistry. We're going to talk about nutrition. We're going to talk about food security, all within a matter of a few minutes. Because you can't dissect any one piece of that information and make an educated opinion without being aware of everything else that's happening. So for example, if you are against high fructose corn syrup and all refined corn products because they're biologically detrimental, well, all of a sudden you've undermined the food security of this country. You've undermined the agricultural commodity that is extremely important. So you need to have the big picture. The other thing too is we need to be able to allow you to find your own research questions. What interests you? Because what interests one student in this class is certainly going to not interest every other student the same way. So this course is like a choose your own adventure. You can decide what you study, and your opinion will decide what is on the exam, which we'll get to. So the first thing we're going to talk about are the assignments. Now the assignments, when we talk about inquiry-based learning, is based on the recognition that it is essentially a question-driven, open-ended process that students must have a personal experience with. So what does that mean? Nothing's starting to go yet, is it?
Well, it's just falling over.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we're going to talk about that in a second. So, for your assignment, you have to tweet 10 assignments. And those assignments are embedded course material through the lecture slides. So, what you do is anywhere there's an assignment, so right here, you can see assignment button. Anywhere there's an assignment, you can choose to read that article and tweet about it. Now, to save you the hassle of doing all of the searching, of course, it's not going to let me do it there. I've got to go up on the main screen. And it's not going to let me do it in this class. Are you kidding me? I came yesterday and even tried it. Let me just go to the next slide. No. Mirror displays. I have one more try at this. Anyhow, when you click these articles, they will open in Google Scholar. Sorry. Why is this? I'm going to just close that. No, I'm not. Okay. So you'll have these linked articles. So there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of linked articles. And pick 12, any 12. It can be on food science, it can be on nutrition, it can be on agriculture. It doesn't matter. You're going to pick those 12 articles. Your assignment is 240 characters. That's it. So you have to show that you've got something out of that article that you have conveyed in a tweet. Now, your tweet's going to be graded in 3 different ways. So each tweet, total of 10, is worth 2%. That 2% is divided into 1/3. So 1/3 of the mark, or 2/3 of the 2 marks, is going to be on the clarity of the tweet. Did you write in the Queen's English? Or did you put things like LOL or WTF, stuff like that? We need to ensure that you can speak and articulate at a level of a second-year student. The second part, or the second third of that tweet, is going to be the content. Did it convey something from the article, right? So did you actually read the article, get something from it, and share it with your peers? The third part of your tweet is going to be your influence. How far did your tweet reach? Was it retweeted? Was it interacted with? Was it liked? Was it commented on? Did it start a conversation? So 1/3 of the 2 marks is going to be based on, did anyone engage with your tweet? Did your comment make any difference in the world? All right. I'll give you a second. All right, are we ready? Has the shock worn off? Okay, so now what we're going to do. So every Friday, not tomorrow, you're going to do one assignment. You're going to read one article, you're going to send out that tweet. You can read 10 articles and send out 10 tweets. Every Friday, you're going to pick your best performing tweet from that prior week, and you're going to email it to be marked at foodtweets@uaguelph.ca. Yes?
So what if you don't have Twitter and you just made a Twitter, meaning that you have 0 followers?
It's all going to, I'm going to facilitate it all through the U of Guelph, the U of G food prof page. So I'm going to retweet everything, and then it can be interacted on my page.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the other thing I'm going to do is every week I'm going to try to engage with between 5 and 10% of the tweets, the best ones, the ones that are most thought-provoking. If I comment on your tweet, you automatically get 100%. If you can get another prof at Guelph to tweet on it, you get 100%. Okay? So if you create an engagement that matters, that's all that I want you to do. That's 20% of your mark. Now, your first Twitter poll should be coming now. So, how are you feeling about this course right now? So if you have a tool to interact with, please do. And what I want to do, Kayla, are you sending that? Okay. Are those starting to turn yet? All right, in a second, did it work? That's fine. All right, let's see if it comes up now. Notifications. Do you guys see the tweet? Is the poll up? Yes. Am I not following U of Guelph Food Prof? That'd be embarrassing. I'm following me. Why can't I see it? Oh, here we go. Terrified. So one of the cool things we're going to do is when I ask questions in class, you can all interact without having to put up your hands, without having to talk, and we're going to put the results up. So we can always see what other people are thinking in the class. So, yeah, 10% are terrified. I'm with you in that one. 47%, what have I got myself into? This will be an amazing course, I promise you. It's not going to be something to worry about. All right, so what do we got? We got lots of time. This is good. All right. So when we talk about inquiry-based learning, the first thing we've got to talk about is motivation. So we've already talked about the assignments because the only way I can motivate you to do anything is by grading you. That's it. So we've already talked about the assignment. We're going to have so you'll notice there's two different, there's food 2150, food 3090. Your distributions are a little bit different. There's going to be 10 questions on the midterm. There's going to be 10 questions on the final exam. The questions are going to be short answer, half a page each. That's it, okay? No multiple choice, no fill in the blank. Those don't test anything other than rote memory and are useless. So we're going to focus on trying to, you're going to get this. Don't worry about taking photos and stuff. You're going to get all this information we'll talk about in a second. The assignments are worth 20%, and seminar, which we're going to talk about Monday and Tuesday for those in it. Now here's the thing that's really cool. What's going to happen is the top 4 trending topics from the U of Guelph food page are going to make the basis of 4 of the exam questions. So if you're talking a lot about water activity will be a question on the midterm. You will get 9 out of the 10 topics prior to the exam 1 week. I'm going to give you the topics. I'm also going to let you write an open-ended question on any aspect of this course that I'm going to personally mark. So there's going to be 9 questions, 5 of which are going to be decided based on how much conversation was generated around it, how interesting was that topic. 4 questions are going to be based on things that I think you should know. And the last question is going to be on something you've learned. So it could be on an assignment article that you want to talk about, something that when you write an exam, you feel like when you write an exam and you feel like you know something so well and you walk away and you're disappointed that that question wasn't on the exam, that's what this is for. Because again, I want to cater to the fact that every one of you have different interests. You will get the topics 7 days prior to the exam. Okay? Now, accessibility of information. This is the most challenging aspect for me. So we are going to do a whole bunch of things to try to facilitate the best way we can the transfer of information from me to you. So the first thing is, I have spent an absolutely enormous amount of time preparing lectures, experiments, things to get you involved in this course. And I'll just give you an example. Hopefully this one works. My click doesn't work. Maybe I can click with this. Can I click with this? I have one, well, anyhow, that doesn't really matter. So, every week, we will put the lecture notes after the lecture onto CourseLink. These are going to be timed lectures. So what that means is right now, everything's recording. So the timing that's in here is going to be saved. So you can go home, hit play on this, and it will stay on the slide for as long as I talked about it. The other thing we're doing is we're recording in 2 different spots. So we've got a recording going on up here and a recording down here. I'm going to integrate those with my PowerPoint presentations, and I'm going to put them on YouTube. So you're going to be able to watch the lectures over and over and over again if you want to. Probably not going to be the most exciting all the time, but you're going to have access to the course notes, so the PowerPoint presentations. I'm going to record the lectures for you, and I have TAs taking notes for you. So in the bottom of the PowerPoint presentations, in that bottom section where you can make little notes, I'm actually going to have the TAs constantly taking notes for what you need to know and what you need to take away from every slide. So you're going to have everything you need without even coming to the course. Again, I hope you do choose to come, because we talk about a lot of really, really cool and important different topics. The other thing we need to do is we need to manage extended activities. So again, 7 days prior to the exam, when I give you the 9 topics, I'm going to give you a study package. The study package is going to include the lecture notes, they're going to include the notes that the TAs have taken, and they're going to contain the YouTube lectures. So you know exactly the content that is expected to be known for the 9 topics on the exam. Okay? So there's going to be no surprises. I'm not trying to trick anyone. I'm not trying to get anyone to stumble. I'm going to give you absolutely everything you need to succeed in this classroom. And I'm going to try to use technology to mediate this. And I'm going to use an example, I think, coming up in a second, which, okay, we can start to turn on Periscope.
Oh, I think it's been on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
So can you live see Twitter? Can you see a live feed right now in Twitter? Okay. So that's what we're going to do. So I can live feed the experiment that's happening now. So this isn't important to know right now. We're going to talk about this later, but I wanted to illustrate a point. So everyone will know eventually. So here's our experiment happening right now. We can zoom in a bit. So Maillard reaction. Maillard reaction is a reaction that happens absolutely everywhere. Maillard reaction is a reaction between what we call a reducing sugar, which again we'll define what a reducing sugar is later, and a protein. So any food that has glucose or fructose and a protein will undergo this chemical reaction. This chemical reaction is extremely, extremely important. It's why maple syrup turns this color. It's why bread has a crust. It's why coffee smells so good. So if you compare fresh coffee to dark brown coffee, this is the same bean roasted. One having undergone the Maillard reaction, one having not undergone the Maillard reaction. So pass these around and smell the difference. There's one set. That's a chemical reaction that's ubiquitously found in foods. Again, if it has a reducing sugar and it has a protein, this chemical reaction will take place. Now, it's also the chemical reaction. Where's the condensed milk? There should be one can that's... Yeah, perfect. So everyone knows what condensed milk is, right? Delicious, it is. What happens when you boil a can of condensed milk? It doesn't caramelize. Thanks. It undergoes the Maillard reaction. Can you start opening some of those cans? So here we have condensed milk. Can you see that? No? Where am I? Man, I suck.
There's a bit of a delay.
Anyhow, you'll see the one. So this one, I can't say it, this is one of my examples. Dulce de leche, has anyone ever heard of that? Is boiled condensed milk. And I want you to taste the actual product. So do you want to start passing these around with these? Just start throwing them up the rows randomly. So this is Maillard reaction. And Maillard reaction is extremely important, not only from a food quality perspective. There's other reasons why it's important. When that reaction happens with asparagine, so a simple amino acid, does anyone know what's formed? No? Acrylamide. Anyone know where else acrylamide is found? Tobacco, smoking. Acrylamide is a carcinogen. This doesn't have a lot of asparagine in it, but potatoes do. So when you eat French fries or potato chips, you're actually exposing yourself to a carcinogen every single time, just like smoking. Now, what are we doing about it? Potatoes have just been genetically modified, so they don't produce acrylamide when they undergo the Maillard reaction. To give you an idea of how severe and how much of a problem this is, when we form acrylamide, and we'll talk about this reaction, not today. Again, it's just between a reducing sugar and an amine. They produce all these beautiful flavors and aromas, things that we are desired, that we crave. How are we doing for passing those out? Keep going, just pass. Yeah, open them and pass around a biscuit so they can dip it once. No double dipping. So just pass a sleeve with each can. All right. So those are the types of interactions that are going to take place in this course. I'm going to try to constantly be illustrating and showing you different things, different processes that happen and why they matter in the food industry. So I want you to stop and think for a second. Western countries' single largest contributor for mortality and morbidity are diet-related chronic diseases. So you and your peers are more likely to die now from the foods you eat than anything else. 50 to 65% of the Western population is afflicted with at least one diet-related disease: hypertension, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high cholesterol. All of these things are diet-related chronic diseases that increase your risk for coronary vascular disease and for cancer, which are our big killers now. Oh no, I'm so disappointed. When I was doing that experiment, I was supposed to put on my new lab coat. I'm going to put it on anyhow because my mother-in-law made it for me, and it is the coolest lab coat ever made, ever assembled. I'm so sad I forgot to put this on. I'm so nervous today though, but I'll put it on now. Oh, but I haven't talked about the actual experiment, so I can go over and do that. Oh, microphone came off. All right. And my lab goggles. All right, which one's this? All right, here we have glycine and glucose. Do you notice the beautiful color it's turned? This is synonymous with the crust on your bread, the maple syrup, your dark roast coffee. All of this is happening because that reducing sugar has interacted with that protein. Now, which one's this one? Okay. They're both glucose.
No, that was fructose.
This is what?
Fructose.
Sorry, fructose, glucose. They've been exposed for the same amount of heat. Why is that reaction, the darkness, different? We're going to talk about that. Now, if we add sucrose,
That's glucose.
this is glucose with a sulfite. Why we add sulfites to food? So we talk about nitrates, sulfites. People talk about them because they're carcinogens. They stop Maillard reaction from happening. So if we don't want that color to happen, we can add a sulfite. Or we can use a non-reducing sugar. So this is, oh, these are hot.
Are you touching?
So here's sucrose. Sucrose is a non-reducing sugar. This will not partake in the chemical reaction we just talked about. So again, when we talk about Maillard reaction, we're talking about foods that you eat constantly, daily. That biscuit that you're eating now, the color of that biscuit is because of the Maillard reaction. The reaction in the condensed milk is because of the Maillard reaction. You can stop the periscope now too. Now I constantly do this. There it is. So now, for the first time in human history, more people will die from chronic diseases than from bugs. This is globally. This is HIV, hepatitis, Ebola, all of these viruses that we talk about and that get so much attention in the media. You are far more likely on a global scale to die because of the food you are consuming today. And it's even started to change how the UN is interacting with health. It used to be germs, 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 germs. Now, it's this public health emergency in slow motion. And it's almost worse that we're dying of chronic diseases because they are extremely expensive to manage. So if you end up with high blood pressure, it's a drain on the medical system over the next 20 or 30 years. What's even more terrifying is that nearly 2/3 of the deaths in America are related to diet. We've invented new diseases, things like childhood obesity. Type 2 diabetes in children didn't exist 100 years ago. But there's great things we've done as well. In the last 250 years, we've increased the life expectancy from 35 years to over 70. I would be past my prime in the 1800s. Now I'm just having my midlife crisis. We've also increased the nutrition of people. People are on average taller now than they were 200 years ago. Why? Because we process foods. Because we're able to have vegetables and fruits seasonably available to us year-round. This wasn't the case a few hundred years ago. So we've done a lot of amazing, amazing things to the foods that we consume. We've had tremendous accomplishments. Again, just by looking at the longevity changes in life is enough to say that we've done a lot of great things. But we've done a lot of bad things. We use sugar and salt to preserve foods. We add a lot of sugar, so it reduces the water activity, so microorganisms like Clostridium or E. coli or Listeria can't grow in that food. We add a lot of salt to foods to do the same thing. So when you say, oh, well, just take the sugar out and put in a sweetener, you lose all the functional properties that give you a shelf-stable product. The problem is we can't solve the problems by using the same technologies that I was raised to use. So things like canning, pasteurization, all of these things, we can look for better alternatives. And we'll talk about why and where those needs are through this course. So when we talk about evolution, I'm hoping everyone here at least somewhat believes in evolution. So evolution occurs in response to an evolutionary discourse. And an evolutionary discourse is anything that alters what behaviors or what profiles are preferential. So when we are adapting to our environment, if our environment changes, our genome changes in response to that stress. Is our food a significant enough stress to actually entail an evolutionary discourse? Is what we consume changing our evolutionary path? So that should be coming on Twitter. Yes, no, maybe. So let's see. Kayla, did it go out? Okay. I'll let you guys vote before I do. So again, is food enough of an evolutionary discourse to change the evolutionary path we are currently on? Let's see what the poll says. Yes, 100%. Only 6 people. There should be 200, sorry, 200. Come on. You need to engage through Twitter to be in this course, please. See if that number has gone up from 6? Oh, 85. Great job. So 5% say no, 11% say maybe. I will give you scientific, factual proof that it has. So Dr. Rob Scott is a professor at Rutgers University that I had the privilege to work with. And Rob he was an anthropologist. And he had a fascinating conversation with me one day, and we talked about the changes that the body has undergone in adaptation to the foods we eat. So if you look at the evolutionary path, if you look at a hominoid versus a Homo sapien, look at the size of the dentation, the size of the teeth. Dentation has significantly decreased in our evolutionary path. And this occurred, and again, this is where I cannot pronounce words, the Pleistocene era. Anyone know what major advancement happened in the Pleistocene era? What change would have happened that would have required that wouldn't require large teeth?
Grinding of grains.
Grinding of grains, chewing of tubers, ripping of meat, the introduction of fire, the idea of cooking. The introduction of fire meant that we could gelatinize tubers, meant we could gelatinize meat so it was softer to chew. It changed the amount of dentation on our teeth in direct response to the introduction of fire. So cooking, as simple as cooking your food, is enough to have an effect on our evolutionary path. When we think of food science and nutrition, we don't even talk about the consequences of cooking. We don't even think about a time when we would have eaten a tuber like an apple and we would have chewed it and it would have been disgusting. Why do we gelatinize it? What are the different applications of gelatinizing it? We cook it, it has a change in our evolutionary path. What happens when we take the starch out of it and we refine the starch and we use starch in breads and in puddings? What does that do? What does refining do to our evolutionary path? Because I assure you, it plays a role in our biological makeup. It's why everybody in their 50s and 60s is fat. It's why we have hypertension. It's why metabolic syndrome is rampant. It's because of what we do to our foods. It's not necessarily the type of food we eat, but by constantly processing it. What are we actually doing to our evolutionary path? And this is something we have to constantly talk about. So the important thing from an evolutionary perspective isn't necessarily what we eat, but what we have done to that food prior to consuming it. Have we cooked it? Have we refined it? Have we homogenized it? Have we pasteurized it? Have we added additives that were not part of our diet 100 years ago? What are all of these changes doing from a biological perspective? Because a lot of times it's not good. We've made a lot of mistakes. We invented trans fats. Everyone in this room, irrespective of their background in food, I hope understands trans fats are not good for you. The Canadian government, the US government, has banned producers from hydrogenating, partially hydrogenating fats because they're so toxic. Yet we advertised them in the 80s as being the next miracle replacement for butter and animal fats. And it was huge. We've made many, many, many mistakes in designing our foods. This is our opportunity to begin to fix them. It took us 12,000, I forget how many, a million years, I don't know, to figure out that our tooth size changes. How long is it going to take for us to figure out that our metabolics are actually changing in response to the foods we consume? Yeah, 12,000 years. Again, something so small as cooking a potato has a huge effect on how your body digests that potato. But not only that, and this is a conversation with Rob I had that was really fascinating, trying to understand what you can tell simply by the teeth in evolution. So by looking at how that tooth wears, how your tooth crack, how they get these little channels from chewing food, anthropologists can look at your tooth and tell you the type of diet or that type of diet that was consumed in that area. They can tell you if they relied mainly on animal-based products or if they relied on seeds based on how the tooth wears. So again, something so small as a tooth becomes so extremely important. And the crazy thing is our dentation has changed based on geographically where you were born. So if you were born in the southern hemisphere, you have more dentation than if you were born in the northern hemisphere. Why? Because fire was first found in the northern hemisphere. So our diet changed prior to that in the southern hemisphere. So our dentation is smaller. So we have smaller teeth. When the 1700s hit, food completely changed. We can talk about important inventions. The printing press is up there for one. That's extremely important. The automobile, electricity. None of them are as important to the changes that happened to our food supply during that same period. The refinement of sugar, the refinement of vegetable oils, the polishing of rice, the refining of grains, all of this happened less than 250 years ago, 350 years ago. We don't know the consequences of what that's going to have on our population for another 100 or 200 years because so much has changed in the Industrial Revolution. Now, do I have time for this video? Yes, I think I do. But sound, just I need to find... Do you see the sound cord coming out of anywhere? It was here yesterday. Oh, here it is. No, it's not going to play. It'll be on course link tomorrow. So, for most of human history, we lived as nomads, and we got our food based on the changing seasons, right? We would have hunting season, we would have gathering season. Very rarely would we eat a meal that was extremely high in lipids and carbohydrates at the same time. Now that's a balanced diet. So this article here, if you pick your first article for an assignment, really fantastic read. The Clinical Nutrition Origins and Evolution of the Western Diet, fascinating. Talks about the implications of what we do to our foods on our human health. But 10,000 years ago, when we talk about our evolutionary path, all that began to change. We began to form settlements. We began selecting the best crops, right? So we do traditional plant breeding. We ended up realizing that the value of the commodity grain was in its starch at the time. It was its energy source, because 90% of every person's time pre-Neolithic Revolution was spent foraging and gathering food. 90% of 90% of the population's time was spent foraging. Today, less than 10% of the population in North America produces a huge amount of food. But this didn't only change the way we were eating, it allowed us to develop arts. It allowed us to develop societies, to develop language, because all of our time was no longer spent foraging. We began to introduce animal husbandry, trying to select the best animals, the biggest animals, the most muscular animals to be in our food supply. We began to select the most starch-rich crops. But about 250, 300 years ago, that all changed. 70% of the calories you consume today were not available pre-Industrial Revolution. 70% of the calories that everyone consumes in this room would have not been available for the vast majority of our evolutionary path. Think about that. Something as important as diet has so radically changed that it's changed the fundamental makeup of our populations. Things like refined sugar, refined vegetables, vegetable oil, cereals, most dairy products, alcohol was limited, mixed foods, pizzas, cookies. How many of you drink a can of Coke a day? 1, 2. That's 1 year of a single can of Coke a day. That's more than we consumed 100 years ago in a year for 1 can of Coke a day. But sugar isn't just a sweetener, right? It binds water. It allows hard candies to form. It allows structure. It allows chemical reactions like Maillard to happen. It provides binding for water so it doesn't support microbial growth. It has so many important applications in the food industry that it's not just an energy source. But as an energy source, it's terrible. What else has changed? Cereals. If you look at the top row, those are our current cereals that we're consuming. Those are our ancient grains. The amount of nutrients compared to starch that was in these grains far exceeds what we have today. But not only is there less nutrients, we remove them. We refine them, we pull them out of the food, we throw them away as animal feed, and we sell you the starch. We put starch in pizza, we put starch in soups. We make structures for foods out of starch, but we don't use the healthy component of that grain. Sugar consumption since the post-industrial revolution, so prior to the post-industrial revolution, the average consumer consumed 6.8 kilograms of sugar per year. 1 can of pop equals 14 kilograms. By having 1 can of pop, you consume more sugar than our ancestor did 100 years ago. On average today, we consume 69 kilograms of pure refined sugar per year. And I know a lot of you think, well, I don't add salt, I don't add sugar to the foods. It's hidden in almost every processed manufactured foods. Because it is so effective at binding water, it is such an attractive ingredient because it can limit the water activity. So again, in 1822, we ate the amount of sugar added in 1 12-ounce can of pop every 5 days. Now, we consume that on average every 7 hours. So again, huge biological consequences. We've seen a 130% increase in the last 100 years in the consumption of cooking oils. Some good, some bad. In shortenings, we've seen a 140% increase. Of table margarines, a 410% increase. All of these things are going to have impacts. They're going to be far more profound than the amount of dentation we have on our teeth. Things like metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes in kids. All of this, all of the processing, all of the refining, all of the formulation we do to foods creates metabolic syndrome. And we're going to talk about the links between our diet and food. So when you talk about, well, if we structure a food using A, what is the outcome for us? So these are the types of things we constantly have to think about. So again, what else has changed? It took us 12,000 years to figure out that the size of our teeth changed. Imagine how difficult it's going to be to figure out the consequences of diet on all of the metabolic factors when we talk about insulin secretion, ghrelin hormone production, leptin hormone production. All of those things are determined how your body interacts with food, how fast your stomach empties, how much adipose tissue you have. All of this is at the very foundation at our evolutionary path. And the foods we have changed have completely changed the way our bodies work. So that's the introduction to this course. So what we're going to talk about, what we're going to try to talk about, is every single aspect you can imagine of food. We're going to talk about the biology of tissues, of muscle. We're going to talk about the microbiology, the fermentation of cheese and wines, the genetics of people, why some people avoid bitter foods and eat more sugars. There's a genetic basis for that. We're going to talk about the chemistry behind why we process foods. We're going to talk about the nutrition of it, but also the politics. What's changing in the world today? How do we process foods? How do we engineer them? How stable are they? You know, we don't want to create a milk that's not processed, but that separates in a half an hour into a cream layer and a serum layer. We want a nice, consistent, uniform glass of milk. How do we do that? We're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about the business aspect of food. So this course is going to cover every aspect that we can possibly imagine. And with that, we're going to stop for the day. So, course, what are they called? Course outlines are up here. Everything is going to be posted to CourseLink and to YouTube. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get it onto YouTube because I haven't figured out how to actually do the videos yet, but it'll come.